Louisville will take down Georgia Tech on Saturday in prime ACC football action, but how will they do so? We'll explain coming up on today's episode of Locked on Louisville.
You are Locked on Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, welcome into this special Friday edition of the Locked on Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to thank you all for making this your first listen of the day. Grant Mulligan, football analyst for stateoflouisville.com, is back on for his weekly spot on the show. What's going on, G-Money? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you all as well. I'm grateful to be back on the show. Thanks for the fans for tuning in. It has felt like forever since the last time Louisville football played a game, even though it's only been a week break. Very excited to be here and break down Georgia Tech a little bit.
Grant said it. We will explain to you why we think the Cardinals will be victorious on Saturday against the Yellow Jackets. We'll identify the players to watch for in this matchup, and then can't have G-Money on without a premier buy-sell segment. So we'll conduct that at the conclusion of the show. I do want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, which is just a couple days away, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Great for starters. Both you and I think that Louisville will win this matchup. The Cardinals opened up as a 10.5-point favorite, according to the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. I'm not sure how much that line has changed. I imagine it won't change that much up until game time. It feels like if you're betting the spread here, that sort of feels like a dangerous play almost, or is it just me?
I think 10.5, anytime in a conference game, especially the first conference game we've played, setting the line being that steep makes me a little nervous. And it's not something that's Georgia Tech specific, but you have a small sample size for us. They have a much larger sample size for Georgia Tech. So 10.5, I think that was the last thing I saw. Is that what you said as well?
Yeah, 10.5.
I don't know if that's not to think I don't think that Louisville can win by over 10, but every time we get into like the real situation, and Georgia Tech has played both their conference games tight. Granted, we know that Florida State isn't what we thought they were, but they're tough. Not as tough as we thought week 0, but 10.5 is always a steep spread in situations like these.
Admittedly, it feels like much higher on the Ramblin Wreck than a lot of other fans out there. And I brought Jackson Caudell onto the show, Georgia Tech Sports Illustrated publisher, and I was hoping to get some clarity on just how good GT was, because that Florida State win, it's flawed. The Syracuse loss, something that I wanted to get a little bit more insight into. I still left that episode not really knowing how good Georgia Tech is, but I guess you could almost say the same thing for Louisville, because they really haven't been able to display it as much. If I tell you that you have to fill in the blank with only one answer, Louisville beats Georgia Tech because, what's the one thing you point to?
Preparedness. I'll tell you. Do you want me? That's my one word. Do you want me to explain why I say that?
Go ahead. This isn't like a fill in the blank and move on to the next question. You just have to choose like one thought to build off.
My thought for this is preparedness. Georgia Tech is one of the few teams that we have 4 games of sample size on, because they played a week 0 matchup. Versus we have 2 games played against non-conference lower tier opponents, in which we played a significantly dialed back version of our offense. This is the first game in which we will be displaying our fully open playbook by Brom, Shough, and crew. Whereas we have 2 conference games, competitive conference games from Georgia Tech already, and 2, much like ours, lower conference, non-conference games. But we have 4 games of tape on them. They have 2 games of tape on us, in which we are showing a very limited offense, a very limited defense. And we're coming off of a bye week in which we had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. I think that given the sample size both staffs have to work with, especially given how creative the Broms are offensively, and clearly we had a weakness against running quarterbacks against Jack State, which I think giving 2 weeks for Ron English to work with his players and his staff on going into a game with a known mobile quarterback. I think that we have been given a lot of time and a lot of sample to work with on Georgia Tech, and they have not been given near as much as we have. Not to mention, I just think we're a more talented team. That's just the truth. But I think that the preparedness gap for what they have on us versus what we have on them, I think that will be the difference.
I could see Louisville blowing Georgia Tech out, and I could also see Louisville losing this game. There's so much uncertainty with both teams. You mentioned it. I also will bring up something to contribute to that thought, is that Louisville has to be prepared. Georgia Tech is one of the better teams in the conference that gets up for these types of games. Like, they don't shy away on the road. They're 3-2 in ranked games since Brent Key permanently got the job last year. They've won 3 ranked games over the past calendar season, and the 2 losses were to Georgia and Ole Miss. So just goes to show you they've beaten Miami on the road because Cristobal doesn't know how to kneel the football. I digress. They beat North Carolina on the road when they had Drake May and Amari and Hampton. That's a pretty good win. So I agree there. I think that if Louisville steps on the gas early on and doesn't sleepwalk into this performance, I do think that they're going to win. I would argue that my statement, Louisville will beat Georgia Tech because they throw the ball all over the field. Georgia Tech's pass defense is really not that good. And it all starts because they just can't generate a ton of pressure on defense. Like, they didn't pressure Kyle McCord. He threw for almost 400 yards. They really couldn't pressure Florida State that much. The issue is that DJU, you could talk all day about that offense. And then the other 2 games, I mean, that really doesn't matter. But I don't think that Georgia Tech is a great defense. I think they have some decent pieces that can, throw a wrench in your plans, but verdict is still out as to whether or not they're a good rushing defense. And I imagine Louisville tries to set the tone on the ground, but I think that Louisville's really going to win this matchup in the trenches. They're going to keep Tyler Shough upright, and that's going to allow him, like you mentioned, when the playbook gets opened and they decide to really stretch the field, it's going to be tough to really challenge these Louisville receivers.
I agree. And I have a very glaring weakness that I have seen in their defense since I have watched especially in a couple games, but I don't want to spoil it too quick. I want to talk about it in our next segment whenever we get there.
I will mention Georgia Tech has 5 sacks on the season. 3 of them came against the VMI. So they just, the pass rush isn't getting there. And that was one of the main concerns about this team coming in, was like, okay, they've lost a lot on defense, already a defense that was probably literally, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, one of the worst rushing defenses in the country last year. And it looks like that could potentially be a problem in this way. Let me pose this before we get into identifying the players to watch for, Grant. Do you think that it bodes better for Louisville if this is a shootout type game, or more so a low-scoring defensive matchup? Because both teams have explosive weapons on both sides. Like, which benefits Louisville more? Like, are they more likely to win a shootout or more of a close game that's low-scoring?
Personally, I would feel more comfortable if we were to get into a shootout kind of situation, because I think we are so littered with weapons in the pass game that I don't feel that they're going to be able to have an answer for. Granted, we also have a very deep running back group and a very solid starting offensive line group who I think would pave the way. But if I was to have to choose between the two, from what Shough has shown me so far, I felt excellent about his arm talent, about being able to move the ball, access all areas of the field. And I feel like we have weapons in the right places to take advantage of this defense, and that pass defense especially, like you were talking about.
Okay, that's fair. No, I agree there. I think that Georgia Tech's defense is just not really as equipped as Louisville's is. Like, if Louisville's offense goes into like shootout mode, I'm more confident in Ron English's unit to be able to offer more resistance than Georgia Tech's defense. So I do think Louisville wins this game very, 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 very quickly. What's the final score?
I'm going to go 38-17.
Okay.
I know I said I wouldn't touch the 10.5. It's just a comfort thing with spreads, personal opinion. But I think that this could be a big statement opening conference win No disrespect to GT, but I think that's how this one ends up.
I'm going to go 31-20. I think those that bet the spread are feeling very, very nervous at the end of this game.
Sweating on yours.
I think that Georgia Tech is I think that Georgia Tech will score somewhat early. They'll probably score the majority of their points in the first half, but I expect Louisville to make those halftime adjustments like they did in this matchup last year and win this game somewhat comfortably, I guess. But let's dive into this matchup a little bit more, identify the offensive and defensive players to watch for. We'll do this coming up on the next segment of Locked on Louisville. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much, much more. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part's guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And before we get into the next segment of the show, I want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Home Field has an agreement in place with the University of Louisville. And for those that don't know what Home Field is, it is a premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis. They have a focus on creating incredibly comfortable and officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. The Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 is a month-long campaign delivering everything needed for the football season. The football boxes, which contain, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 3 never-before-seen items for your school that are not available anywhere else. You have the opportunity to also be able to get coaches' jackets, bomber jackets, Champs Week apparel, and much, much more. Go to homefield.com, homefieldapparel.com, and mention that you are a Louisville fan, and you can go to the Louisville site, get all your premium Cardinal gear. Thank you for your attention to this. Be sure to check out homefieldapparel.com. Not the greatest transition there. Look, I'm over here adding my name tag to it again. I had it on the wrong screen. I was like, oh, wait, I'm on the other ad reads. But nonetheless, we're in the second segment of this Friday edition of the show. My guy, G Money, football analyst for State of Louisville, Grant Mulligan, on for his weekly spot. Grant, one offensive, one defensive player to watch for in this game. Let's start on the offense.
All right, I've been really excited to talk about this one. I found this one in my research, and it's why I alluded to it in the first segment. My player to watch on offense is Mark Redmond, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, you look at the Syracuse game. Huh?
I hope
so.
Tell me it's Mark Redmond. Go ahead and tell me why.
Tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. Syracuse and Georgia State, both games in which they had a competent passing attack against Georgia Tech. Who was their leading receiver? Tight end. Both of them had 60 yards and a touchdown at least. And now Syracuse's tight end, Oronde Gadsden II, is one of the best tight ends in the country. So that one's going to be a more consistent staple across most of Syracuse's games just because of how talented he is. But you wouldn't expect the same thing whenever you're playing against Georgia State. And so I see a clear weakness when I'm watching their games in that I think the tight end position is a mismatch against their safeties and linebackers. And I especially think that it's time for Mark Redmond to show more than just the flashes he's shown us in the first 2 games, in which he's shown us extremely great concentration, over the shoulder catches, contested catch situations. And I think this is a great matchup for him in this defense that has already been gashed by the tight end play. I think it even more than him. I think the tight end room as a whole is going to feast here. So Mark Redmond on offense, I'm really excited to see this matchup. I know that the Brahms are seeing what I'm seeing when I'm watching this tape, and I hope they have a special game plan ready for Mark Redmond. I would not be surprised at all to add us as the third team to have our tight end as the leading receiver against the Yellow Jackets.
We know about Georgia Tech's passing defensive woes. I'm going to throw a little wrinkle into this. My offensive player to watch is Maurice Turner. Don Chaney Jr.'s status is up in the air as far as I'm still aware. That ankle injury he suffered against Jacksonville State. Do you know if we have any update on that? Because I don't think he's spoken on it.
I thought I had seen something earlier in the week about how or if he was limited in practice or not. I don't want to speak on it because I can't recall it offhand.
Regardless, it's been sort of radio silence. If his availability is affected, I look for Louisville to still try to set the tone on the ground. That means all eyes are focused on Maurice Turner. And for Maurice, this is an opportunity to show the doubters, hey, look, I know I'm not Jawar Jordan or Isaac Garendo, but I'm Maurice Turner, and I can do the job. This is an opportunity for him to come in and really assert himself for the first time this season. They really haven't needed him the first 2 games. This is a game that Louisville could really rely upon him. And if he is effective and efficient, I think it opens up an incredible amount of opportunity in the play action game, which I think Tyler Shough can excel in. So my offensive player to watch for is Maurice Turner. Now let's go to the defensive side, Grant.
All right. I was in debate of which of the 2 linebackers to pick because I think, as we talked about for our last 2, is that running quarterbacks have been a problem for us early. So I think it's going to come down heavily to linebacker play. So I'm going to say Stanquan Clark. I'm going to say our most athletic young linebacker that we have in the group so far. I think that if they intend to put a spy on a guy like Haynes King, we've got a guy on our defense, and I don't know that Stanquan's going to be this guy, but I feel very confident putting him in a situation where you can let his athleticism shine, spy the quarterback, run a guy down sideline to sideline. So I think with his instincts and what he showed me in high school, converting from the safety position to linebacker and what he's shown us so far as his role continues to grow, I think this could be a statement game for Stanquan Clark in helping shut down Haynes King and his running game.
I went back and forth here. I like that pick. I like that you went with a quarterback spy because I was originally going to go with that until I realized Georgia Tech has not given up a sack all season on the offensive line. No pressures. Haynes King is doing a great job of not only getting the ball out quickly, the offensive line is doing what they can to keep him upright. Ashton Gillotte would be a lazy answer. I'm going to go with Tremel Logan. The current leader in sacks for the Cardinals was sort of interesting because he really didn't get announced onto the team until like late summer, but the South Florida transfer showed in the first 2 games that he looks to be the running mate opposite of Ashton Gillotte, at the very least, backing him up. I think that Louisville's going to need to get a pass rush against Haynes King to force him to speed through his progressions. That's how you're going to get him out of rhythm. I think Tremel Logan, with his speed off the edge, not only will help in pass rush, but also trying to seal that edge and not let Haynes King get outside of the tackle box. So that's the main thing for me. I'm going to go Tremel Logan is my defensive player to watch, with honorable mention to Marion McDonald, versatile defensive back that I think could be deployed in a couple different ways. Some stunts off the line of scrimmage as sort of a defensive back, blitzer, you name it. So a lot of players to watch for, but I know you all tuned in to this episode wanting to see who was going to be more successful in the buy sell. Last week, I wasn't all that great. I had to switch up my statement middle of stating it because I confused myself. I went against what I'm saying. I've got 2 really good buy-sell statements. I'm going to defeat Grant this week.
I think you are, man. I think you are. I've got a couple sponsored by FanDuel prop bets, player props, over-unders. Once we get into there, sponsored by FanDuel. Proud partner of the show. Check them out.
Speaking of FanDuel, before we come back from show, or before we come back on the final segment of the show, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. As Grant mentioned, today's episode of the show brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you go to FanDuel.com, you'll be able to, at this point, see the bets that Grant is about to talk about in the buy-sell segment, and also check out all of the other player props for the Louisville Georgia Tech game, 3:30 kickoff tomorrow on Saturday. Well, again, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season afternoon game on Sunday that's out of market. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Visit FanDuel.com to check out America's #1 sportsbook. Won't lie to you, G-Money, that was smooth. I like that. I like that a lot. But there's no friends in the buy-sell game, good sir. I'm actually really not happy that you decided to say that I was going to win it. I don't like the reverse jinx that you tried to pull, even if you weren't intending for it. I saw that card be put down face down. So let's go ahead. Go ahead. You got the first crack at this. What's the first buy-sell?
All right. First one, like I said, I've got 2 player props. Not sure if you'll actually find these on FanDuel, proud partner of the show. FanDuel's live read was excellent today. Regardless, this is an alternate spread by me right here. Haynes King under 50 rushing yards. Buy it or sell it.
That's a good one. Last year he had 53. And it felt like a lot of that came in the second quarter, if not the majority of it. A lot of film they have right now. Obviously, they have the experience of playing against Haynes King. Jacksonville State's quarterback just went for 100. The buy sell is that he's going to get under it, right?
The buy sell is under 50.
Technical question: do they factor sack yardage into that? I think they do now.
In college, it does factor sack yardage. In college, it factors sack yardage.
So on a technicality, I'm going to buy it because I do think that Louisville can get a sack or a couple sacks. And I think that that's going to be a point of emphasis, that they're going to make the others beat you. So I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that Haynes King under 50 yards rushing. So, like I mentioned, Georgia Tech's offensive line has not allowed a sack this season. They have a lot of returning pieces on a line that was really good last year, a line that did not allow a sack to Ashton Gillotte last season. Gillotte really hasn't played a ton in the first couple of games because he hasn't needed to, Grant. Buy or sell, Ashton Gillotte will record at least 1 sack on Saturday afternoon against Georgia Tech.
Buy. He knows he didn't come, or he didn't get a sack last year. He knows he was held in check. He knows that Georgia Tech has not allowed.
I'm going to DM him right now, and I'm going to ask Ashton, do you remember that you didn't get a sack against Georgia Tech?
He knows. It's personal. All right. This is personal for him. It may not be. I could completely be blowing this up, but I believe in his motivation because he hasn't gotten to showcase himself yet so far. Like you said, he hasn't gotten to play as much because the situation hasn't called for it, and you don't want to put him in injury situations. But here, the leash will come off, and he wants to remind the world who he is. He wants to put himself in those first-round draft conversations. Okay. I'm absolutely buying one here. I think that he is fully coming off the leash. He knows it. He's feeling it. I'm buying it. Okay.
That's right. I thought it was pretty interesting because you know that Georgia Tech is going to do everything they can to, chip him at the line of scrimmage with either a tight end or a running back coming out of the backfield just to kind of slow down the momentum like they do with any premier pass rusher. And then Georgia Tech not allowing a sack through literally a third of the season, and that's against the Florida State and Syracuse defensive line. But I'm going to buy that too. I think that Ashton does get a sack here. So what is this? This is going to determine it, Grant, because we had fairly easy buys. Okay. What's the second one?
Mine has to do with the first 2 segments, my buy-in here. I'm going to say, not just Mark Redmond, I'm going to say the tight end room accounts for at least 2 touchdowns on Saturday.
I'm selling that.
You're selling it. You don't think that we're going to take advantage despite the fact
2 touchdowns. I'm selling it.
2.
I'm selling it. Touchdowns. Yeah, I'm selling. Here's why.
Okay.
You know that when Louisville gets close to the red zone, especially in goal-to-go situations, they love to run the football. It's been shown that. I can imagine that Louisville's going to try to run the ball, and they're going to try to set the tone at the line of scrimmage. Anything outside of that, it's basically saying that you're asking Tyler Shough either to roll out and find a tight end on like goal-to-go situation, or Mark Redmond, Jaleel Skinner, Jamari Johnson, Isaiah Cummings to catch a ball, from a good amount of distance. I think Ja'Cory Brooks is going to be fed a lot of targets this week. I don't disagree that the tight end room will be instrumental in this game. But when it comes to scoring touchdowns, it's like anytime touchdown scorer bet. You feel like Tyreek Hill and Derrick Henry are automatic. Yeah, per FanDuel. It's like you know that they're automatic to score, right? Well, Tyreek Hill did not score last week. So it goes to show you that for a tight end, if you were to say a tight end to score 1, I'd be on the fence, but I'd still buy it. It'd be plus odds. But 2, that's one of those that you really tried to take care of your mortgage on one Saturday afternoon due to your betting on title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. I have to sell that, Grant.
They have already allowed 3 or at least in the games that I've looked at, they have allowed 3 touchdowns to the tight end. Against Syracuse, they allowed 2 touchdowns to the same tight end. 4-game sample size. You got it. You see, you got your answer.
Really isn't like it's a good amount compared to like what it could be, but that's still not a lot. 4-game sample size is not a lot, especially when 2 of those are against. I mean, it's the first road game that they would have played. I'm going to sell it.
Okay.
My second buy sell.
Your second, yeah. Let's hear you.
But I do think that the tight end position is going to be key. So there's a difference there. Jeff Braun made an interesting comment on Wednesday evening on his radio show about the status of a certain player that has been out all season, suffered a collarbone injury in a scrimmage, 2 weeks before the year, was out about 6 to 8 weeks was our given timetable. He mentioned that he's hopeful that this player is back next week. But if not next week, he's hopeful that he's back the week after. The buy-sell is that we see Colin Lacey make his Louisville debut against Notre Dame next Saturday.
Based on his comments, that makes me want to buy. I'm going to sell it, though.
Is it gamesmanship? You have to figure out, is it gamesmanship or is it like legitimate? Yeah, this is where we're at. He's a little bit.
This is a one sell that I want to be wrong on so bad, but I do not want to rush back such a talented player and have him not feel 100% or be at risk of re-injuring himself, because this is a guy who's going to be instrumental down the stretch of our season. And I do not want to put him at any kind of an additional risk. I want him to feel as healthy as possible, as ready to go. I think having him back for Notre Dame would be massive, and I would love that. But I'm going to sell it. I think we give him one more week. That's not any expertise on my standpoint. That's just pure caution and to think that possibly Braum is throwing a little gamesmanship here.
That's fair. You go back to when this all happened. A 6 to 8 week timeline. 6 weeks put him out exactly the Notre Dame game. Like 6 weeks to the day was Notre Dame. There were rumblings that I couldn't really cross-check the validity to about, people had said, it's like this guy talks to this guy's friend who is friends with this guy's barber who's a nephew of this guy who actually enjoys listening to this. You know what I'm saying? Enjoys listening to the same music. It's like there's a connection. It's like the telephone game.
Who enjoys listening to the podcast.
There were a couple of, I wouldn't even call them sources. There were a couple of rumors that basically was saying that, like, yeah, there's a growing confidence that he's going to be ready by Notre Dame. And I didn't mention on this show because I didn't want to be the one that was pointed to saying, oh, well, Dalton Pence from Locked On Louisville says he's going to be back from Notre Dame. I was like, we'll see what happens. Now Jeff Braum is saying, I'm going to buy it because I want to buy it. Yeah. I'm going to buy it because I think we're going to see him in some capacity. Is he going to play the majority of snaps? I don't know. Do I think you might see him on a couple of plays? There's a possibility. So I'm going to buy this.
I'm very on the fence. This was a good one.
Let me know in the comment section below who won this week's edition of Buy Sell. Drop G Money or D Pence in the comments below. Look, we need to know. Bragging rights are of the utmost importance here. Don't even worry about the Louisville Georgia Tech game. Worry about who won the buy sell between Dalton Pence and Grant Mulligan. That is the key here. That is the question of the day. Be sure to drop it in the comment section below. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back for a post-game recap before Monday, so probably on Sunday morning we will give our thoughts on what happened in the game, and hopefully we're talking about a Cardinals victory. That's going to wrap up this week's episodes of Locked on Louisville. Everyone have a great weekend. Go Cards. Be safe. Stay out of the sun and heat, and let's get that dub.